Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to dive into something absolutely fascinating, but honestly, pretty dark. We're impartially unpacking a really provocative thesis by researcher and author David Shapiro. We're looking straight at his warnings about humanity's seemingly inevitable transition into a fully automated economy. Think about it. What actually happens when human labor, our physical strength and our cognitive intelligence, is just no longer required to keep the world running? It's a heavy, heavy question, and Shapiro's analysis gives us a deeply structural, historically grounded way to look at this rapidly approaching future. But before we map out exactly how we get there, we need to define the terrifying endpoint that Shapiro is warning us about. You might already be familiar with author Yuval Noah Harari, right? He popularized this idea of a coming useless class as AI outpaces human intelligence. But Shapiro argues that calling it a class is actually way too generous. Why? Well, because the word class implies you still have some sort of civic standing or political weight. Instead, Shapiro uses a much more clinical, much darker term, redundant biomass. It is a chilling phrase describing a future where human intelligence and physical labor are, economically speaking, entirely useless. Literally just biology that isn't needed anymore.
Section 1. The Rise of Technofeudalism, the End of Human Economic Utility. Let's get into it.
So, to understand why assuming we'll get to keep a civic class is a total fallacy, we have to look at historical precedent. History is actually packed with examples of disenfranchised people who weren't treated as citizens at all, but just as a renewable, completely disposable resource. Take Chinese peasants under the ancient corvée labor systems. They were forced into service for massive mega projects, things like the Great Wall and giant canals. The mortality rates on these projects were often north of 50%. Warlords could literally afford to waste these lives because the fertile river valleys just kept producing an annual crop of humans. They were an expendable resource, sure, but the key takeaway here is that they were still a needed resource. But what happens when you aren't even needed as a disposable resource anymore? Shapiro argues that unlike those ancient peasants who were required for their backbreaking labor, humans in an automated future face complete economic obsolescence. He sums it up with this incredibly blunt realization. When robotic soldiers are the ones fighting the wars, and AI agents are running all the businesses, your very existence transitions from being a useful asset to a net negative. You literally become a drain on the economic system.
Moving on to Section 2, the illusion of rights, coercion versus enlightenment.
To really grasp our vulnerability here, Shapiro points out that we currently live under what he calls enlightenment delusions. It's that comforting belief that we all possess natural, divine rights guaranteed by a creator. But his upcoming work centers on a much harsher, realist theory of rights. Under this theory, human rights and human dignity are actually just legal fictions. Historically speaking, all that grandiose, beautiful language of the Enlightenment, it was only written post hoc, after the fact, to justify the bloody extraction of concessions. Basically, every right we enjoy today was secured through coercive force, through strikes, revolts, and bloodshed. The crucial point here is that human nature remains ruthlessly pragmatic when push comes to shove. We absolutely cannot bank on the goodwill of those in power once our economic utility vanishes. Shapiro uses this stark, horrifying historical example of the British Empire, when they let millions of Bengali people starve because the empire wanted that food for other strategic purposes. They didn't treat it as a massive human tragedy. They simply wrote off those deaths on a ledger as a temporary labor shortage. And this was an act committed by a so-called highly civilized society. It really just proves that when human utility drops, human empathy is usually right behind it. All right, Section 3. Three forces of automation. The overdetermined future. Shapiro identifies three immense, undeniable forces that are all pulling society in the exact same direction. It's creating this inescapable attractor state toward maximum automation. First up, we've got geostrategic competition. The US and China are locked in this Cold War 2.0, which guarantees that AI and robotics will be top-tier political and capital priorities for decades to come. Second, capitalism and neoliberalism. This is driving the largest private megaproject in history. And third, rational economics and creative destruction. When it comes down to it, 340 million Americans, millions of businesses, and hundreds of nations are just going to choose the cheaper, faster, automated options. To truly wrap your head around the scale of the capitalist drive in that second point, just look at the numbers. By 2030, we will have spent trillions of dollars on the AI and data center build-out. Trillions, with a T. This infrastructure push is so unbelievably massive that it will completely eclipse every single previous megaproject in human history. It's already vastly larger than the Apollo program that put us on the moon, and bigger than the Manhattan Project. The market has definitively spoken, and the capital is flowing like a tsunami in one singular direction.
Which leads us to a pretty brutal conclusion. When every business, government, and household makes the totally rational economic decision to choose AI over a human, we become the permanent weakest link. As Shapiro notes, the inevitable outcome is a maximally automated economy. Why? Simply because, relative to advancing technology, humans are slow, dumb, and expensive. Actually, if you're building a system for maximum efficiency, the human is literally the very first thing you engineer out of the loop.
Which brings us to Section 4, becoming redundant biomass, the double-edged sword of technology.
Now, technology is obviously a double-edged sword. On one hand, we have this glorious promise of automation. We're talking fully automated cancer research, incredible space exploration, environmental rehabilitation with solar farms that literally build themselves, and hyper-personalized education. It sounds like utopian abundance, doesn't it? But there is a massive inherent sacrifice on the other side. The exact same automation that promises to liberate us from daily drudgery inherently guarantees our dark reality. We become economically, structurally, and politically irrelevant. It's a package deal. You really can't have the utopia without sacrificing our utility. And the crazy thing is, we don't even have to wait decades to see this dynamic playing out. Technofeudalism is arguably already here. Consider this reality check. Shapiro shares a personal anecdote where he instantly woke up and lost over a quarter of his income because of some opaque automated demonetization policy enforced by Google, which he basically equates to a modern feudal lord. His livelihood was slashed by a totally unfeeling algorithm, and his only recourse was an automated appeal checked by a low-paid worker halfway across the globe. It is jarring to realize we're already living at the mercy of these automated fiefdoms. So if you project that current dynamic forward into a fully automated future, you reach this chilling conclusion. What happens if tech billionaires and the elite secure every single step of production? We're talking automated mines, automated farms, manufacturing, all of it guarded by robotic security. The masses could face a nightmarish future of total exclusion. The elites wouldn't even need to actively oppress us. They could quite literally just ignore us and wall us off entirely. A completely self-sealed system. Okay, Section 5, the final veto. Halting production before it's too late. Despite how grim all of this sounds, and it is detailed heavily in his upcoming book, Labor Zero, there is a silver lining, at least for the moment. The system isn't fully closed off just yet. The owners of capital still physically depend upon human labor right now. The elites cannot run the world without our physical input, our logistics, our maintenance, and our consumption. And because of this, humanity still possesses immense leverage. We have an incredibly powerful collective veto to strike, to demand concessions, and theoretically to halt all production to ensure a post-labor social contract is drawn up favorably for the rest of us. But, and this is a big but, that window is rapidly closing. As automation advances into robotics, into driving, into cognitive tasks, we're losing that veto power inch by inch, day by day, which leaves us with the ultimate question. How much longer will we actually hold this collective veto? If our rights are historically only secure through leverage, what happens the exact second that our leverage hits zero? It's a critical question we have to answer, and fast, before our power to shape the future vanishes entirely. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope it gave you a really clear, structured look into the forces shaping our automated horizon. Lots to think about.